learning new skills, cooking from scratch, preserving in a way that helps feed my family of 9 in today's video. Hello, summer. Today what I'm doing in my kitchen is I am prepping for a week of meals. If I have protein already cooked, it's easy to throw together a meal. I'm starting off by cooking 2 pounds of ground sausage. Here I'm using some homemade garlic oil, cooking the 2 pounds of sausage, and I'm just adding some basic ingredients: salt, pepper, some sage, and some red pepper flakes. And my 2 meal ideas that I had with this ground sausage is pizza and a sausage orzo 1-pot meal. But if things were to go off the rails this week, I have that ground sausage I could put still into pizza. I can make a breakfast for dinner or something else. Keeping things fun in the kitchen and learning new skills is what keeps me excited to be in the kitchen. And right now, that is learning how to make water kefir. So that was my first batch of my second ferment, and that pop meant it was fizzy enough so it tasted like a homemade soda. And I'm making my second batch, and you're supposed to keep a little bit left in the bottom of the jar. I tasted the little grains, or what they called. They didn't really taste like anything, but anyway, on to the 2 flavors. I actually saved these 2 bottles to make homemade vanilla extract, and I hadn't got to buying beans yet, so I'm using them temporarily until I can find some different bottles. But we did the grape, and then my daughter had the idea of having a Hawaiian flavor, so we mixed coconut and pineapple, and it was delicious. And here I'm showing you with that sausage, I made pizza for the first night with fresh basil from the garden, homemade sourdough pizza crust. And because I have a newborn, I didn't get to everything I wanted to, so here I am the next day I'm showing you. First up is I have been trying to transition my family into half whole grains and half, ground flour from the store, but I know they pull out a lot of nutrients, so I'm trying to put nutrients back into the food that I cook at home. And right now I'm really enjoying using spelt, which I buy in bulk from Azure Standard, and I'm grinding that up. You'll see in a little bit that I actually make bagels with it, but I almost forgot I needed to pull out these sweet potato rolls and let them defrost because they're from the freezer. So that's going to go with tonight's dinner. I set them aside, and I'm going to start the bagels. And I made a huge batch that I put a couple meals worth in the freezer so we can have them for other days. But I made the mess once. I just cooked more than I needed. And then now I'm moving on. My freeze dryer was done with peaches, so I'm bagging them up in Mylar bags this time because I have a bunch of half-gallon jars already processed, but we still have tons of peaches, so I'm doing another batch. And if you want to see that video coming up. Next up, I got a box of apples from Azure, and we have been loving the apples from Azure, but this time a lot of them are a little soft, so I'm making some apple pie filling for the freezer, but I'm also using some of those apples to prep some baby food that I'll need in the next few months. That way that those softened apples don't go to waste. My baby food, I don't add anything except for a little water to get the food started, and then I cool it down, run it through my blender, and I actually use my silicone muffin tin to put them in the freezer, and once they freeze, I just put them in a gallon bag with fruit or vegetable or meals. I separate my baby food a little bit. And here I'm just getting it on the stove so I can get the apple pie, but the baby woke up, so you'll see me turn off the stove, and I'll come back to that later. And next up, I use some of that apple pie filling to actually make a French toast bake. I normally don't make oven breakfast, but if anything I can make right now that is kind of a prep ahead and saves me time in the morning, because mornings are always a little bit more chaotic when you have a newborn and other children and a dad that goes to work in the morning. So here I'm doing a French toast bake, and we find 6 eggs to 2 cups of milk are a good mixture for French toast. And I laid the apple pie on the bottom, poured my mixture after letting it sit for a couple minutes, I'll put the lid on and it stays in the fridge until the morning. And since this is a glass baking dish, I do put my dish straight into the oven before turning the oven on. That way I'm not putting a really cold glass pot into a very hot oven, which could break. So that's a little trick about that. Next up, I am sharing Blackberry Galette. So galettes are basically a rustic pie without all maybe the prettiness to it. It's one of our favorite things. And I'll put my galette dough recipe in the description. And then the flavors just depend on what we buy at the farmer's market or from Azure or from wherever we get some fresh fruit. So this time is blackberries. That was one of the children's requests. And I added cinnamon, cardamom, and here is some arrowroot powder. I find that fruits that are really juicy, the arrowroot powder helps the filling kind of gel up a little bit more than flour. So I've been using arrowroot powder when I'm making a peach galette or a blackberry galette, something that's a little bit more juicy. And I have not mastered the pie making dough, so I'll roll this out. And as far as the filling, you can also add lemon to bring flavors out. You add a little bit of sugar. Sugar I add is between like 2 and 6 tablespoons. It kind of depends on the fruit that I'm using. Maybe peaches that are super ripe taste a lot sweeter. So these blackberries were a little tart, so we did add about 4 tablespoons of sugar. You can pile it as high as you want, but some of the people in my family like it to lay it out a little flatter. And then you just carefully fold the sides in, put some small pieces of butter around there, and then I like to do an egg wash. You can also do a little bit of milk. I just find it goldens up a little bit better with some egg wash. And then depending on the fruit inside, you could also do a little bit cinnamon sugar on the outside. That's our preferred when we do like an apple galette, which we do a lot in the fall. And then I'm teaching one of the children. And then you pop it into the oven about 400 degrees, and it takes about 20 minutes or so. It's best to get it out of the oven and actually let it sit and let those like juices kind of like thicken. Sometimes we cut into it right away, and this day it wasn't super juicy, so I was able to cut right away. It's still a little hot. It's a delicious treat for summer. Thanks for sticking around this week. I'll be having more videos like this soon, so please subscribe. I'll see you next time.